Hi and welcome back. My name is Coriander of Coriander Quilts, and today I have such a fun video planned for us. First off, I have a new free quilt pattern that I am sharing with all of you today. This is called Easy as Cake, and it is a free PDF downloadable pattern over on my blog. So we're going to be chatting about this. I am going to be demoing a fun ruler and talking about the 4 at a time flying geese method. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun, so stick around. So this is the Easy as Cake quilt pattern, and it really is a very simple layer cake friendly quilt pattern. It finishes at 44 by 56, so just a real nice throw sized quilt. And I thought it was so pretty using the coriander colors fabrics mixed in with the coriander seeds fabric. Last week in the Saturday video, I chatted quite a bit about coriander colors and coriander seeds. So if you missed that video, be sure to check it out because I went into a lot of detail about the prints in those two basics collections for Moda Fabrics. Let's chat about this quilt a little bit. For this quilt, you just need 1 layer cake. I'm using coriander colors, and actually you only use half of the layer cake. So if you were to double up on the other fabric requirements, your background and your star point fabrics, if you were to double up on those, you could make 2 quilt tops with just 1 layer cake because we are just using half of it for the prints of the stars in this quilt top. So you need the layer cake or 10-inch squares. If you have scraps and you want to just pull 20 10-inch squares, you could certainly do that. And then your star point fabric, I used the black polka dot from Coriander Colors, and your background fabric. And I used the Happy Words fabric, which I think is such a fun print. I love it with these colorful brights. I thought it was really pretty with those, and it was fun to use. So now, what I want to talk about in this video is the 4 at a time flying geese method, which is the technique that I used on this quilt top. It's so nice that we have a lot of different options when it comes to making the different units within a quilt. And this is just another technique. Probably many of you are familiar with this, but for some of you, it's going to be the first time that you're hearing of this 4 at a time, no waste flying geese method. It is the technique that we used all throughout Moda blockheads for our flying geese. So if you have been sewing along for Moda blockheads, you're very familiar with this technique. And I quite enjoyed making them this way, making flying geese units this way for the last, we've been doing Moda blockheads for about a year, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and I've enjoyed using this technique throughout the whole time frame. Now, I did not use any special trimming ruler to trim down my flying geese throughout Moda blockheads, but as we neared the end of Moda blockheads, I think we have maybe, by the time you're seeing this video, probably just 1 more block to come out. So by the time we were wrapping things up, I realized that I would enjoy using a trimming ruler specially designed for this technique. And so I purchased this Creative Grids ruler. This is the Ultimate Flying Geese tool by Deb Heatherly, and it is for Creative Grids. So when I wrote my Easy as Cake pattern, I utilized that 4 at a time, no waste method of making flying geese units, and I trimmed them all using this tool. And it was the first time I was using this tool, and I really did enjoy using it, so I thought I would share it with all of you. I know not every ruler is for every person, but it is nice to know the different options that we have. For me personally, I don't tend to buy a lot of specialty rulers. I often will make do with what I have on hand. But if I know that it's going to be a ruler that I will use often in the future, and if I know it's one that saves me time, that's when I really start considering a certain ruler. So let's talk about this 4 at a time method of making flying geese. The nice thing about this ruler is that it has the sizes that you need to cut for oversized pieces so that you can trim everything down. Let me put this on a white piece of fabric, white piece of paper, so you can see this a little bit here. So up here in this top corner, it has, slide over, there we go. It has the measurements for the finished sizes. These are finished measurements of your flying geese. It'll tell you what size you need to cut the large square and what size you need to cut the 4 small squares. Utilizing this method, you have 1 big square of fabric and then you heard me say 4 smaller squares of fabric. And this is going to be this portion of your flying geese. And then the small squares are your star points. So big square is this, small squares, that part. So let's start talking about this method of making flying geese. The first thing you will want to do is to mark your diagonal lines on the back of your smaller squares. You can either mark 1 diagonal line, knowing that you're going to be sewing a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides, or you can mark your sewing lines. I more recently have been marking sewing lines when I have been making these. And when I mark them, I tend to use one of these little 1/4 inch marking rulers. They allow you just to place the ruler right along that diagonal. Oops, got that upside down, right along that diagonal. And then you can just take your pencil and mark both sides of that line. And this gives you nice, accurate sewing lines. I will make sure and list the tools that I am using in the description box down below. So if you are wondering about anything I am chatting about, you'll have the information handy down there. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is take 2 of your marked squares and you're going to align them in the corners, in 2 opposite corners of your square, right sides together. And you're going to want your lines to line up. So these lines here, as they come all the way down through, whether you've marked both the sewing lines or whether you have just 1 line running the whole way down through the center, you need those to line up. Once you have those lined up, you can either pin these in place or you can hope they stay where you want them to. I'm more of a hope they stay where you want them to sort of person, so I did not pin my squares before I sewed, but you might find that you wish that you had. So you are going to prepare your pieces like this. You're going to have a little bit of an overlap there in the center. Once you have done that, you are going to go ahead and sew. This is what it's going to look like after you have sewn on those sewing lines. I usually press everything at this point in time so everything lays nice and flat. And then the next thing that we do is we are going to cut this apart on the center here. So you might have that marked, or like I do, I'm just cutting from point to point and it's not a marked line. Either way is fine, but you're just cutting that apart on your diagonal. And that is going to give you 2 pieces that look like this. After you have done this step, you're going to want to press these away from the center. So we're going to press these out, both of them. And then you're going to end up with pieces that look like this, kind of like a little heart-shaped piece, something like this. I always think these are so cute at this point in time. So we have these 2 pieces like this. And then we are going to take our remaining 2 marked squares. Remember, we started with 4. And we are going to place these right down here in this bottom corner. Now, I've noticed that when I do these, if I have these 2 marked lines, ideally the tip right here of my marked line is hitting the edge of my fabric on both sides. And they are most accurate when that lines up like that, when this little marked bit that I have here of my sewing line hits right there in the edge. And it does, so I would sew this on both sides, and then you would do the same for your other piece, sewing on both of those lines. Again, pinning or not pinning as you see fit. Slide those over. Once you have sewn that square on, you're going to end up with pieces that look like this, where they are sewn here. And then we cut these apart again on that diagonal. I really enjoy using these Quilter Select rulers. They are very nice and grippy, and I have slowly been switching over the last couple of years. I've been using these for a few years now, but switching all of my rulers to these Quilter Select because I find them to be so nice. After cutting your units apart, you have 2 that look like this. and then you're going to want to press those away from the center. And after you've done that, you end up with these. So all of these pieces we made without the use of any specialty ruler. But once we get to this step and we get to this trimming stage, this is the part where I thought that having something a little bit different to trim than just a regular ruler might be a really nice option. So that's where our Ultimate Flying Geese tool comes into play. Let me show you how this is going to work. This size that we're making right now, this 4x8 finished, is the largest size that you can make on this ruler. It goes all the way down to a 1/2 inch by 1 inch finished, so super teeny little Flying Geese units, and this would be the largest size. Up here in the top corner, we have a trim 1, and if you rotate the ruler, you have a trim 2. You're going to start with the trim 1 side. I'm just going to set that to the side. We're going to trim just this one right here. And as you are looking at your cutting measurements, you have letters denoting each size of the Flying Geese units. So my 4x8 inch finish size is letter H. So over here, I'll lay it on the fabric, you'll be able to see. Yes, we have H right here. There's G, F, E, D, C, B, and A. We're working with H. And so what I am doing here is I am lining up the point. You have your 1/4 inch seam allowance nicely marked around the perimeter and the point of the Flying Geese unit nicely marked. You have dashed lines coming down each side so you can line up your triangle very nicely. Once everything is lined up, you are going to trim across the top and across the right side. So I will do that. Oops, needs one more little pass right there across the tip. There we go. And this is what this unit looks like now. And then we need to pivot this around, and we're going to do the same thing using the other side of the ruler. So this is the trim 2 side. And we're going to line things up in much the same way. We see our H down here at the bottom now. We're going to line up our dashed lines, lining up right here, lining up right here. And because we have already trimmed this edge and this edge, you can also line everything up with the dashed lines here as well. So we've got this aligned, this side, and then the bottom. And then we're going to repeat by cutting on the right side and across the top. And there we go. We have a completed, trimmed, very easy to trim, nice accurate Flying Geese unit. It's nice to be able to trim those down when you do the 1 rectangle and 2 square method of making Flying Geese. We don't as often trim those down. So this is a really nice way to get your Flying Geese nice and accurate. So that is my little demo on this tool specifically, and then also maybe a first time look at that 4 at a time, no waste method of making Flying Geese units. So be sure that if you want to make your easy as cake quilt pattern that you stopped by my blog today, I will have the PDF available to download there. I will also go ahead and mock up some different fabric options using this pattern so you can see what it might look like in some other fabrics. I think it would be really pretty in Starberry, so that is definitely one that I will take a gander at to see how it looks, but I'll do some other things as well. If you have any questions about anything, be sure to let me know. I'm always happy to answer those for you. I thank you so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.